I'm Joe DeRamo, one of the founders of My Pinnacle Network, and this is the More Than 2 Minute Drill. For this podcast, we are talking to Steve Dubin, the founder of My Pinnacle Network. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here with another esteemed expert.
You're too kind. For this particular podcast, we're going to talk about something near and dear to your heart, the ideal client, and how that fits into networking. So this was a 2-minute drill we did for what our My Pinnacle Network meetings a while back. But if you could refresh some of the viewers as to what is the ideal client and how does that fit into your networking strategy?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Let me sort of set the stage as well about why we even bother creating an ideal client profile. All too often, I find that in our networking groups, people aren't real clear as to the kind of customer or client they're looking for. And when they leave that open-ended, they're more likely to be given counterproductive introductions that are frustrating both for the person trying to create business as well as the referred party. And if we can be really specific about who we really want to be introduced to, we are more likely to strike that chord with our referral network who are thinking about us, as well as we are more likely to be able to better serve that more productive client.
And how do you make that clear to people in your networking group? What are you looking for? I mean,
right.
Surely people can't remember that. So how do you get that across to them and make it, easy enough for anybody to follow?
So good question. So what I should do is say that we're going to make these available to the public as well. We have a generic sort of checklist of here are the things you need to think about as you're putting together your ideal client profile. And we can also provide them with one that we specifically put together for our other business, PR Works, which is an outsourced marketing company focused on creating public relations messaging. So the first thing you want to think about is what's the size of that business? Are we looking for a solopreneur kind of business? Or in the case of most of our members, they're looking for mid-market sized clients. And that's typically $500,000 to $10 million in revenue, and typically 5 employees to, let's say, 100 employees. So they're large enough where they have substantial budgets, they have a sense of who they are, and they know that they're just large enough to have needs and they can compete at a fairly robust level, but they need to go outside and hire services to do it well and at a real reasonable price.
And is that only about the size of the company, Steve? Or how does the operation of the company and the different roles people have, how does that play into an ideal
client profile? So that's a good question. Typically, next step is really the niche. So who do you see more commonly served by your company than the outliers, the aberrations? So we say to people, really look at your client base and who is the most common visible link in there. And so, in our case as a PR firm, we tend to do really well with oddball clients that just have unusual stories to tell that are mid-market size. So New England Burial at Sea is a good example. Boot Camp for New Dads is a good example. And then we look at, who's the person we're actually communicating with. And so some of that is, are they entrepreneurial? Are they willing to take risks with some of their marketing? Are they comfortable talking to the press? Are they comfortable in their own skin? Are they open-minded about talking about out-of-the-box promotions? For us, all the above are the kinds of people that we tend to look for and do well with. People who are entrepreneurial, they're extroverts, they want to talk to the press, they're fairly articulate, they're good at sharing colorful language, and they're open-minded, and they're willing to take some coaching to do better in talking to the press.
So, I mean, that's our business, but for another type of business, let's say a
Yes.
CPA firm or um, we have payroll companies. What what would be like a checklist of things that they should have in their ideal client profile?
So again, we want to start with what size is the client. Secondly, what are some of the niches you do well with? So an accounting firm might do really well with um, people who are in home improvement crafts, plumbers, electricians, and that might be something that works for them. It could be also something like law firms, but they need to know what that group is that they're serving well. And then the next thing they want to look at is what stage of a business do you really do best with? So, for instance, a lot of people like to stay away from startups. Startup businesses tend to be really cash strapped and at the same time, really requiring a lot of hand holding and a lot of extra services. So they don't have much money to spend, yet they are very demanding. And it's really hard to be profitable and serve them well.
What's the best way to get across your ideal client profile to people in your networking group? How do you transmit that knowledge? What media does that take form in?
Right. So what we recommend, and again, we will make this available to folks who would like it, is we put together a simple single sheet that outlines here's who we're looking for and here's a couple examples. Literally, not only giving a punch list of the size, the mindset, and the niche, but even a couple examples of the niche, those niche players that you serve.
It's interesting in terms of the ideal client and how many ideal clients do we actually have within our portfolio too. I mean, it's kind of like setting the bar higher, like this is what we want, but is there a I guess is there a line you draw with your people in your referral groups that this is not really the type of
Well, right.
intro we're looking for? Or
So I think we with some integrity and with some sense of self-survival, we don't take clients that don't really fit into how we can serve them well. So if they're really too small and they've got no budget, we might find more of a desktop marketer or a kitchen top marketer who comes in at very low prices and can obsess with them to try to get a message out on a very tight budget. Or maybe they are a client who needs high-end video and TV commercials. Well, that's not really what we do. We would refer them out to several partners who we know do that well. And we're fairly selected talking to folks who can really benefit from our services. If somebody needs a complicated Google ads campaign or a LinkedIn ads campaign, that's really not what we do, but we certainly have resources that we would refer to.
the ideal client profile sounds like something that should be part of your package in terms of sharing materials, either electronically or handouts. But what other documents or files should be supporting that?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I think that you should have a one sheet, as I mentioned, that you can hand to somebody when you're having a one-on-one meeting, or nowadays that we're doing more virtual meetings, you can bring it up on the screen to show somebody your ideal client. But I guess how do you support that? I'd have another sheet that says how I'd like to be introduced. So you provide them with the actual language that they can email to their colleague or use verbally. That's a good thing to have as well. And I
About
think,
case studies?
right. And I was going to say the third item I think would be a case study or two that's very brief, that's boiled down to, a couple paragraphs of how you were able to specifically take a problem and resolve that problem into a solution for a client, and be as specific as possible by, if possible, mentioning the client, and if possible, mentioning some of the statistics attached to what that success meant.
Well, like Steve said earlier, we're going to make a sample ideal client profile available on our website. You can find that in the meeting notes here, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on the podcast on another outlet. Steve, do you have any more you would like to add on the ideal client?
No, I think like anything else, what I would suggest is don't worry about making the perfect client profile sheet. Just start with something so that you have something to hand to somebody, that it's tangible, and that both of you have a pretty good understanding of what can benefit you.
Okay. Well, Steve, it's been really helpful having you kind of define what's in an ideal client profile for our listeners. And as I said, that if you look in your meeting notes, you can download our version of it and certainly adapt it to your needs. Steve, thanks for being on the more than 2-minute networking drill. I think we accomplished that mission. It was definitely more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you. I look forward to doing more podcasts.
Okay, we'll be back, I don't know when, fairly soon, with another networking topic for more than 2-minute networking drill.